Hello, everybody. This is Monica Paolini from Senza Fili, and today we're talking about the Open RAN ecosystem in the really big picture and with TIP, the Telecom Infrastructure Project. And I have with me today Renuka Bhalerao, and she is the member of the technical committee at TIP, and also she is the lead of the RAN ecosystem at Meta. Renuka, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Monica.
So you wear two hats, although today we're going to specifically talk about TIP. But can you tell us what is that you're doing in this space to get started?
Sure. So Telecom Infra Project, as you know, this is an organization where we have been driving a lot of innovation in the telecom industry. And my focus specifically has been towards the RAN side of things. So Open RAN to be specific. And we have been driving what we call the productization of Open RAN technology. And that would mean bringing the ecosystem together, bringing all the partners, which include the operators as well as the system integrators, the OEMs, and the technology providers who are building solutions for RAN. And collectively, we are bringing in the drive for what we call a multi-vendor disaggregated RAN, which provides the MNOs the flexibility and more options to choose from in terms of the technology products. And then it's also about how we drive the test and integration through various labs, and that helps to again build the maturity and validate the solutions at the interface level, but also at the end-to-end level. And that leads into what we call the acceleration of the overall deployment process for the MNOs.
Yeah, this is quite fascinating because if there is a technology that I can think of where the ecosystem is absolutely crucial is Open RAN. If you don't have a good ecosystem, it's not going to go anywhere. So this is such a central work that you are doing. But maybe, and this is a question I get all the time. What is TIP doing, and because there is a question of what is a standard, what's not a standard, what is ecosystem. So there is a lot of things that maybe we can start sort of clarifying from the beginning. So what is TIP's target goal, or what is the scope of what you guys are doing? It's pretty wide, but maybe
Yeah.
let's start narrowing.
Well, let's start with what we are not doing. So we are
Okay.
not writing specifications. We are definitely looking at or leveraging what a standards organization like 3GPP or even ORAN Alliance will be driving. And so the specifications will be taken from those organizations. What we are doing is we again put it in the word called productization for the Open RAN system. So we take the specifications, we base the architecture off of that, and then we drive what we call a 6 steps process, which starts with taking in requirements and input from the MNOs, mapping those requirements against what the vendors are ready with today, and then go into a build and test and validation phase. So take the products which are ready today for the use cases that the operators care about, and taking the requirements that they have prioritized and bring those into the lab, test and validate, make sure that the readiness is kind of proven through a set of test plans and test cases. And through that, we are kind of bringing that effort into an optimized way of how the IoT or end-to-end testing or use case related end-to-end test plans are being conducted. And that leads into a set of products which are ready for certain deployments and use cases. As you can imagine, Open RAN is complex. You're talking all the way from indoor to suburban to rural to urban deployments. And so we are going in steps. We are basically looking at what's the today's priority use cases and drive our test and integration and validation towards it, and bring in a product readiness catalog on TIP Exchange, which is essentially our marketplace. And that gives the operators a way of choosing what is available today. And so all of this is done in partnership with all of the ecosystem, again, going back to the operators who are driving the requirements themselves. So the G5 or the OMG MNOs or the European leading MNOs, the operators in Middle East, the operators in APAC, all of them are bringing in their input in terms of the requirements. And that's what we are putting in front of the vendors to take into consideration as they drive their own product roadmaps.
Absolutely. So you basically take all the specs and the standards, they are
Mhm.
given, they are inputs, but then you're working on the requirements. I mean, you can tell us how do you know, how do you get all the requirements? Because there's so many types of Open RAN. So how do you get the requirements, or how does that work?
At a top level, the requirements start with the set of use cases. So you're talking about a set of use cases. It could be for a rural, for an urban deployment, and so on. And based on the use case, then you drive the detailed requirements for the products that will be needed. The Open RAN project group itself is arranged in different work streams to be able to dedicate specific effort on each of the RAN areas. And so we have two hardware specific groups. One is for the RU, the radio unit, the other one handles the CUDU. And then we have multiple software related groups where one is very much dedicated on what we call the RAN intelligence controller. So talking about the XApps, the AIML based optimizations on the SON area. And then there is one with SMO as the focus, so management and orchestration for RAN. And so we call it ROMA, but it's basically a fancy name for SMO. And so that's the software driven intelligence that you are combining. And these are our component subgroups. And then we have two specific subgroups where it all comes together, one for the indoor deployments of Open RAN and another for the outdoor deployments of Open RAN. And so we take the components, the hardware and software, map them to the use cases, and detail out the requirements for these specific deployment scenarios. And this is all done in partnership with all these ecosystem partners. So each of the work stream is led by the set of MNOs who care about that particular piece of the RAN puzzle. And then we take their requirements, we call it harmonization of it. And what we derive from it is a release roadmap. So release roadmap is our foundational framework of how the requirement side or the demand side meets with the supply side, meaning the vendor's readiness side. And that release roadmap is a regular cadence. So every 6 months, we are going to be going through this process of checking the priority of the features and requirements with the demand side, meaning the operators, and then checking the readiness of the vendors in terms of compliance and are the products available to test a certain feature and so on. And then we will be publishing that regular roadmap, release roadmap through TIP Open RAN, which will help drive the priorities. Again, this is a journey. The system is complex. RAN is at stake for each of the MNOs. And so you have to kind of piece the puzzle in a way that you're logically taking in what is most important as they chart out the deployments from rural to suburban to urban. That would be the set of phases.
Okay, so you start, so you have the requirements, you have the standards, and then you have to basically verify that what the vendors have meet the requirements or to what extent. And so how do you do that? Because you can be, supporting or implementing an interface, but the performance might not be as good. So you need to, it's more than just checking whether you followed the open interface or whatever.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
how do you go from there? Because it's, when you talk about interoperability, it's not just being able to work together, but to work together meeting the requirements.
True.
So
True.
how do you get there?
Yeah, so that's part of the 6 steps process. Initial phase will be about publishing the requirements from the Open RAN project group and the vendors kind of reviewing them and providing their compliance against it. So think of it as a large RFI process in general, which you're doing on behalf of the operators. And so the vendor readiness is captured, and we also recognize the products which are ready with that set of requirements. So the compliance ribbon is allocated to the products which are ready with the set of requirements which were published. So that's our step one. Here we haven't necessarily taken the product into the lab yet, but this is a step one or a gate criteria of, okay, the product is ready and can be participating into lab trials. The second step is crucial because that's when you're now putting all the pieces together. So the standard interfaces, the APIs come into picture. We publish our test plans, which are corresponding to the set of requirements. And those test plans are used in the labs to test a set of features and requirements to make sure that the products which were claiming compliance are actually ready in terms of maturity and the level of feature support that is expected. And that test and validation process is done in the labs. It's also done sometimes in the field if the products are ready. And then we also participate in joint Plugfest activities, sometimes, for example, with ORAN Alliance and so on. So collectively, it provides us that insight of where the product maturity is standing. And based on that, then we will be allotting them the level of maturity badges on TIP Exchange. So again, this is a step-by-step process, and the end goal being accelerate the effort towards deployment, because we're talking multi-vendor systems here, multiple products coming into the lab. There is a lot of effort to put it all together and make sure that it's all working against the standard APIs and interface. And this whole requirements to test plans to badging, this process provides a good structured path to get to that.
Yeah, and you mentioned badges and Plugfest and tests, and I think it's really an important thing to talk about, because it seems like it wouldn't be feasible to just certify as Open RAN solution. It doesn't mean a whole lot to just put one. It's not a binary thing, because the same product might meet different requirements for different use cases. So it's not, if I understand it correctly, it's not a yes or no kind of, it's not a binary thing. So what is the role of the badging system and the other testing system? How does it work?
Yeah, so the role we are playing here again is to help the MNOs bring their effort down in terms of checking the compliance and readiness of the products, and also the validity and the maturity of the products. And so to do that, we are publishing requirements regularly. We are publishing test plans. These are all geared towards not a yes and no, but a very specific scope of what's the use case and what's the deployment like, and based on that, what will be the KPIs or the functional requirements that the integration has to support. And so the whole badging mechanism or the awarding the validity mechanism is based off of a specific set of requirements, test plan, functional set of features, and then the test report, the final test report. So you will be getting a set of products, for example, which are integrated together as a solution for a specific case of deployment scenario. So be it an outdoor macro deployment, and then we could say it's for a rural use case or a urban use case. Based off of that, there will be a set of features. So do we need massive MIMO? Do we need to add an algorithm to get the cell configuration optimized and so on? So it all is based off of that, not a blanket yes and no. There is a complex process of, okay, publish requirements, publish test plan, and based off of that, this is how we conducted the test and validation.
Now there is another element, which is time. As you mentioned, this is a work in progress. Where there's a lot of work that has been done and still needs to be done. So if I'm a vendor, I have whatever solutions I have, and I might have many of them, and then they're going to develop over time. So I might not have massive MAMO today, but I might have it next month. So how do you keep track of this? And actually, and the requirements from the operators might change as well. So
Yeah.
how do you have an inherently dynamic environment here? How do you keep track so that vendors don't spend all their time testing their equipment?
Yeah, exactly. So that's why the release roadmap process is important here. What we are driving towards is an iterative process, or a what do you call it, in terms of a CI/CD type of environment. We're talking about releasing a roadmap at a regular cadence of few months. And so you're talking about a set of prioritized features for a particular roadmap release. And as and when the readiness expands from the vendor side or the priorities change from the operator side, you're revising your roadmap. And so we recently released roadmap for release 2.0, and now we are on release 2.0, so that 2.1. So that itself tells that we have a delta set of additional features coming in, and so the next release kind of targets the next set of features. And so the baseline keeps on improving with a set of KPIs, set of functional requirements which come with every release. And that provides the MNOs a way of bringing in their changed, updated priorities, as well as the vendors in terms of adjusting their product roadmaps. Example could be that the Open RAN MOU group in Europe, they published a timeline of about 5 years of how they are dealing with Open RAN network deployments. Initial focus being the base features, the hardware software disaggregation, and then it leads into additional advanced features of can we handle energy efficiencies, can we bring the advanced RIC functionality, and so on. And so it's over the time period, you're kind of aggregating additional features. And that's how the TIP Open RAN roadmap as well iterates based on the input from the MNOs.
Perfect. So let's talk about what we talked about, most about the process. How is actually working out? How do you see? So the idea, the target is that you can have any number of vendors in your RAN. How far away are we from there, and what is the progress being made to date?
Today, so in terms of the positive notes, we have about 50 vendors who have been recognized as compliant to the published requirements. That means that there is a set of partner products which are ready to go in the lab. Are we there yet in terms of do we have multiple different combinations ready to go in the field? I would say it's a journey and we still have some work to be done in terms of integrating various combinations and validating various set of test cases. And that's what is happening today in partnership with various operators and also third-party lab hosts in terms of testing and validating certain set of test plans. And that is the process which will kind of govern how fast this deployment acceleration will happen. And multiple challenges there, as you can imagine. We're talking about multiple products coming together in the lab, different companies working together, and so on. So good progress in terms of having them work together in this kind of complex environment. And we are looking forward to bringing in the published test plans and kind of making this as a standard iterative process of bringing in the demand and the supply side together through a common platform like TIP. And again, ORAN Alliance plays a role here in partnership with us in terms of producing the APIs, the standards, and so on. And we work with a liaison in place the two organizations have today, and that kind of guides on how we leverage the specifications from them and base the architecture off of it. So
Yes. So yeah, is there any, among the all use cases that you mentioned, is there any that is sort of far ahead or running behind, or anything different across use cases?
yeah, so multiple trials have been done since I would say Vodafone showed their own commercial trial in Turkey and showed how it kind of compared against the legacy RAN solution. They published a complete report on where the KPIs were and where the comparison was between a traditional RAN and Open RAN. Since then, multiple of the regional operators have led different lab and field trials. We have been regularly bringing in the test reports and the final playbooks from all those trials as a way to encourage other operators to kind of follow the suit and take that example and run their own configurations in lab and field. So that part has been going very, very well. What we are looking forward to now is, of course, some of the big operators have been claiming to get to a certain percentage of their network with Open RAN, and so we are looking forward to partnering with each one of them in terms of optimizing the test and validation, optimizing the efforts in the lab or field, and also bringing in what you call the next generation RAN features in terms of the RIC functionality, in terms of the newer orchestration and management functionality. And we're driving a lot of that effort with multiple different POCs or proof of concepts as well as lab trials in that area, which will eventually get us to that promise of efficiency and the TCO reduction that has to come with this flexibility.
Now, are you actually a tip? Are you involved much in the rec aspects of it? Because it's a little bit different in terms of you're not testing a product in a sort of traditional way. But I guess here we're thinking about all the elements in a very different way. But are you doing anything specifically about rec or the management of the RAN?
Definitely. So we run two specific work streams on each of these areas. The RIC, we call it RIA, and then the Roma work stream, which is focused on the SMO side of things. These are newer areas, which are, of course, maybe not ready to deploy tomorrow, but will be a very critical component for the end RAN deployments. And so our focus has been to bringing in all those niche companies who are developing solutions in that space, and also building the newer concept of having the XApps on top of the whole brand solution to drive the optimization. And there is a great work going on in these work streams where we see a lot of support from the MNOs who understand that these two features are going to be critical for the end RAN deployments. And so these work streams have been producing requirements, have been producing a set of prioritized use cases based on the operator input, and we have been taking that into lab to do a initial test of how far can we optimize based off of a given feature. We recently released what do you call a initiative that is happening in the tip labs to bring in the SMO side of integration, and that sets the stage of how we could be driving the orchestration and management side of the stream with multiple partners. So that's a great example of how we are starting now. It's a long way for those two features, but those will be going to be critical for the deployments which happen in 2025 and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you see the mobile operators? Because clearly they have been driving all of this, but when it comes to system integration, they will have to basically take on the role that traditionally was taken by the vendor. So if you have an integrated network, the single vendor does the system integration effectively, right? And now they have to do sort of more work on their own, or have a system integrator. How do you see them doing it? Is this going to be a challenge? What do you see happening there? And clearly there is different operators that take different paths, but what is your view on that?
You said it there. Each one takes their own path for sure, but at the crux of it is that basic difference that earlier for the traditional RAN, it was one single party being the front end and integrating all the pieces together and providing it on a platter to the MNO. Today, with Open RAN, you're talking about different product partners taking their own role in the system integration, and then having a system integration dedicated function as well. And that's important. We have to have the standard APIs. We have to drive it in a way that there is less of a customization on the base piece, so that this multi-vendor system can be coming together with the standard test plans and standard requirements. And that's how we are partnering with the MNOs to kind of drive that effort, with 80% of it done as a common base integration for each of the deployment. And then maybe the 20% is where their customization starts to happen in terms of how their specific network is and what specific components they bring in to add their own secret sauce or value. And so that's something which each one of them have been taking in their own stride, but also have been relying on additional efforts from the system integrator partners, and sometimes even the OEMs, in terms of playing a bigger role than just bringing in their product and saying, here it is.
Yes. So oftentimes the idea of Open RAN is that you can just plug and play any vendor. So whatever number is that you have 50 vendors, if you're an operator, you just get any and you put it in a network and it works seamlessly. Clearly we're not there yet. Are we ever going to be there? Or is it a desirable thing to have complete plug and play? I mean, is it realistic and desirable?
That's the nirvana of Open RAN. And I would say we are on a journey towards it. Very happy to see some of the big operators kind of driving towards it with their specific input. So we see Dish, we see Vodafone, or we see other partners, say for that matter, Rakuten and others who have seen the value of having that optionality and multi-vendor products coming to deployment. And so the drive towards that is going to be through all of this effort of aligning on common requirements and prioritizing the features, not having to boil the ocean at each step, but to go in a very specific manner of what matters to my network today. And I'm going to be going and doing the integration towards that set of features first, and then expanding, and then bringing in the flexibility of multiple different options, be it an RU, be it a DU platform, or be it a software component, and so on for each one of them, as long as you have the standard APIs being complied to, the base set of integration becomes that much easier. Again, at the same time, we have to be aware that this is still a complex system. Plug and play is on the wish list. We are not there yet, but the progress we have made collectively as an ecosystem is commendable in terms of okay, we are past the doubt of is Open RAN happening, and we are almost there at okay, this is how it is happening, and this is how we are driving it and prioritizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's quite amazing the amount of progress. Now, let me ask a final question, sort of to sum it up. What do you see as the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity of Open RAN?
In terms of challenge, I would say that integrating all the parts and pieces together seamlessly, and then being able to supply the KPIs that are expected out of a real life network. And that is a good or great challenge to have. And that's where all of these efforts are going, be it 3GPP, be it TIP, be it ORAN Alliance, and collectively, or be it the operators themselves who are driving their own efforts in terms of how their labs are being set up for a multi-vendor system, or in terms of how they're driving the system integration. This is all going in that particular direction to make it happen for the disaggregated RAN. And in terms of opportunity, I would say there is this whole big, so as Meta, we have been looking at what is next in communication, and that's metaverse. And so we're looking at a big set of goals in terms of what is expected out of the network. And RAN being the critical part of it, there is a big opportunity for Open RAN itself to drive towards that kind of a flexible, intelligent RAN, which can drive the traffic for a metaverse or that kind of an immersive experience, not limited just to phone calls or videos on your device, but to a complete virtual experience of bringing the network's latency or the data speeds, all of those parameters to a whole new next level. And that's an iteration of the RAN itself that is going to happen. And that's the big opportunity I would think Open RAN has, because the whole flexibility innovation that Open RAN drives is going to be at the baseline for those networks tomorrow.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, clearly there's more than an interface there. There's a bigger, much bigger picture. So, Renuka, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you so much, Monica.
And for all of you, thanks for listening in. And this is part of a report. You can read the interview as well if you want to, and you can get the whole report at senseaffinity.com. Thank you all.